My name is Natalie. I'm 35, a programmer at a tech startup in Seattle. My life now revolves around clean lines of code and a cozy apartment. But 5 years ago, everything collapsed. My husband, Derek, left me and our daughter, Lily, to run off with another woman. He vanished, took all our shared assets, and left behind a cold message demanding a divorce. 5 years later, he suddenly came back, standing at my doorstep with her and a little girl, speaking as casually as if no time had passed. I need $75,000 for emergency surgery and, if possible, a new car. Before I tell you what happened next, let me ask you this. If someone who once betrayed you came back begging for help, what would you do? Leave your answer in the comments. Thank you for being here. Now, let me tell you my story. The day Derek left, it felt like all the air had been sucked out of the house. The sound of the door closing was dry and final, dragging with it a void that would never be filled. He didn't say a word, just sent one text. I want a divorce. Period. No explanation, no turning back. I stood in the kitchen, gripping my phone, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. Lily, just 3 years old, clung to my leg and looked up, asking, "Where's Daddy, Mommy?" I knelt down, hugged her, and tried to hold back tears. I had no answer. We used to have a simple life, not wealthy but stable. I trusted him so completely that I never even checked our accounts, until the day the bank notified me everything was gone. All he left behind was a divorce petition and a mountain of credit card debt in my name. 1 month later, he told the court he didn't want custody, but the truth went beyond that. No custody, no visitation, no support. He just wanted out. I could have gone after him for child support. Any lawyer would have said so, but I didn't. Maybe I thought I could manage on my own, or maybe I was just too exhausted. After the divorce, Derek disappeared. A friend said he moved away, lived with the other woman, and raised her daughter Megan. He never called, never asked about Lily. My mother-in-law, Susan, was the only one who stayed. She didn't condone what her son had done and kept in touch, watching Lily when I worked late. She became my rock. Her quiet kindness felt like a kind of strength. Derek didn't send anything, not a call, not even a birthday card for Lily. Once a year, I'd get an email from him. "Hope you're doing well." Derek. Empty words, like he was just checking a box. Meanwhile, I was barely surviving. After the divorce, I worked as a waitress at a diner, just making enough to cover rent. On good days, after paying for daycare and utilities, I had about $100 left, sometimes less. We were always one misstep away from falling apart. Lily and I ate leftover food from the diner, half-eaten bread, cold fries. I smiled at her, pretending everything was fine. But inside, I was crushed with worry. 3 months later, I took on more jobs, house cleaning, then cashiering at a grocery store. Every dollar went to rent, electricity, or a new pair of shoes for Lily. I lived in constant fear, afraid of running out of money, afraid that Lily would suffer because of me. My mother-in-law, Susan, became the light in my darkest days. She would come over, bringing a pot of hot soup and funny stories just to make Lily laugh. "I'll watch her, you go to work," she said, her voice warm but firm. I tried to pay her, but she waved it off. "Family helps each other, Natalie." One day, she pulled me aside to the kitchen table and laid down a flyer for a programming course in front of me. Her eyes lit up. "Give it another shot." "I'll pay the tuition." I shook my head, embarrassed. "You've already done too much." But she held my hand, her voice steady. "This isn't helping. It's investing in you." I looked at her wrinkled hand, resting on mine, trembling but firm, and for the first time in months, I felt a flicker of warmth in my chest. I enrolled in the course and started learning from scratch. The numbers and lines of code felt like a new world, one with rules and structure, unlike the chaos of my life. I studied at night after Lily went to sleep, my eyes burning under the glow of the screen. And I was good, really good. I felt alive every time I solved a programming problem. That same year, while I was still in the course, a major tech company sent me a job offer. When Helen visited, she placed a check in front of me and said, "If you want to start something of your own, here's the capital." "I believe in you." I simply squeezed her hand gently and shook my head. "I want to build it myself, Mom. If I've made it this far, I can build a life with my own two hands." She looked at me for a long time, then smiled. A sad smile, the kind only a mother could have when she realizes her daughter-in-law has grown, while her own son never did. I worked non-stop. During the day, I served tables at the diner, darting between crowded booths, my hair filled with the scent of coffee and toast. At night, I took freelance programming gigs, typing until my fingers went numb. Every dollar I earned, I divided carefully. One part for Lily, one part for rent, one part for savings. That first winter, after finishing my contract with a client, I sat still for a long time, staring at the number on my bank screen, unable to believe it. After paying rent and utilities, there was money left over. A feeling both unfamiliar and warm spread through my body, like I'd finally surfaced after years of drowning. I went out and bought my daughter a new coat, not one from the discount rack in the back of the store like before. For the first time, I walked into a supermarket and picked out the things I liked without needing to look at the glaring red sale tags. That night, I took Lily to a small restaurant in the neighborhood, just to taste what a day without fear felt like. Once my income stabilized, I started sending my mother-in-law $1,000 every month. Not out of obligation, but out of gratitude. Helen had never asked for anything, but I knew her old diner still had leaks in the ceiling, and the fridge worked on and off. A year later, with $100,000 saved up, I made the decision to expand my work and build the company I'd always dreamed of. A decision full of anxiety, but also full of hope. And then, something incredible happened. The business took off, and that money turned into $300,000 in just a few months. I remember sitting quietly at my desk, looking at the bank account, feeling like the world had opened up a new layer of air I never knew existed. As the numbers in my account grew, I bought a small apartment in downtown Seattle, furnishing it piece by piece the way I wanted. No more used things, no more wobbly chairs. Everything was new, and everything was mine. I called my mother-in-law and told her I wanted to bring her to live with us. She just chuckled, her voice soft like a breeze. "I love my little home, Natalie," she said. "But I'm proud of you." A few weeks later, I sent her the money to help fix up the old diner. New signage, a working fridge, new tables and chairs. On opening day, she sent me a photo. Her standing at the front of the shop, her smile full of wrinkles, but shining like she'd turned 10 years younger. I looked at the screen and smiled gently. In the end, we both got what we truly wanted. A real home, even if we didn't have to live under the same roof. One evening, 5 years later, while I was sorting through documents at my desk, there was a knock at the door. I opened it and froze. Derek stood there in a wrinkled coat, hair messy, eyes trying to look frail. Beside him was Megan, the former mistress, holding the hand of a little girl around 6. She glanced around the hallway, clearly sizing up the value of the apartment I lived in. "Natalie?" Derek said in a low voice. "I need to talk." I stood still. 5 years of silence, and now he showed up like nothing had happened. "How did you get my address?" I asked, my voice stiff. "Susan gave it to me," he replied. "We just moved to Seattle. Thought we should be near our daughter. I didn't know what to say." I stepped aside and let them in. We sat in the living room. Derek's eyes wandered. New sofa, white curtains, city skyline outside the window. "You've done well," he said. "I'm proud of you." I nodded. not believing a word. He went on, spouting cliches about missing his daughter, wanting to be closer, how family was important. Then he got to the point. I need emergency surgery, he said. $75,000. Can you help? It felt like being punched in the gut. Before I could respond, Megan chimed in. This apartment's tiny for someone who makes your kind of money, she said with a sneer. Your car sucks too. Must be a boring life, I stared at her. She spoke like I owed her some explanation. I need time to think, I said, trying to stay calm. Derek nodded, forcing a tired smile that barely looked sincere. Of course. Take your time. They left a few minutes later. I sat on the sofa, head spinning, like the whole house had been turned upside down without anyone touching it. I called Susan. Derek came to my house, I said. Silence for a moment. What did he want? She asked. $75,000. For surgery. More silence. It's your decision, she said carefully. To help or not. Her voice worried. He called, said he wanted to make things right. I thought maybe he'd changed. I'm sorry if I was wrong. It's okay, I replied. I wasn't angry. She had always been kind to me. The next morning, the phone rang. It was Derek. Good morning, sweetheart, he said sweetly. Have you thought about it? I'm still thinking, I said. Don't take too long, he replied. I need to know soon. He hung up before I could say another word. That night, Susan texted me with a link. Check Derek's page. You need to see this. I clicked. The post was right at the top, uploaded 2 hours earlier. Thrilled to announce I've reunited with my ex-wife, Natalie. She's a successful programmer and has agreed to help fund my surgery. Family is everything. Even though she once left me while I was sick, I'm grateful for her kindness. In the comments, Megan dropped a heart emoji. I stared at the screen, my hand turning cold. Attached was a photo he had secretly taken during their visit to my new apartment. He lied. I never agreed to anything. I called immediately. Take the post down, I said. Right now. The lies about me agreeing. The photo of me, I don't think so, he said smugly. People already believe you said yes. If I take it down now, you'll look bad. I heard Megan in the background. She snatched the phone. By the way, she said, I need a car. Around $100,000. And a monthly allowance of $1,000. I was speechless. On top of the $75,000, she wanted more. No, I said. Absolutely not. Derek took the phone back. You're selfish, Natalie. You have money, but won't help your own husband. You left me, I shouted. You took everything and abandoned me and Lily. And now you show up demanding money? That's the past, he said coldly. Move on. You are not my family, I said. You're a stranger. His voice turned dark. You'll regret this. I blocked his number immediately. A few days later, I was coding when Deepa, the company's CTO, messaged me on Slack. Natalie, you need to come in. I arrived to find her at her desk, looking uneasy. A man came by this morning, she said in a low voice. Claimed to be your ex-husband. He stood by the pantry and shouted in front of the entire team that you're heartless, that you abandoned him when he was sick and refused to help pay for surgery. Everyone on the floor heard my heart sank, like someone had clutched it tight. What did you say? I asked, trying not to tremble. I told him to leave immediately, she said. This is a company, not a family stage. I called security to escort him out. But you should know, he made a huge scene. I thanked her and returned to my desk, my face burning. He had the nerve to show up at my workplace and slander me in front of my coworkers. Over the next few days, messages from unknown numbers flooded my phone. I must have accidentally unblocked him while cleaning up my contacts. Natalie, I need surgery money. You're my only hope. Don't you care your daughter's losing her father? If you don't help, I'll make sure everyone at your company sees what kind of person you really are. I read them, gripping my phone, then deleted every single one. I ignored them. No replies. I wouldn't let him drag me down again. One weekend afternoon, while I was teaching Lily how to paint, the doorbell rang, urgent, repeated. I looked through the peephole. Derek and Megan. He held an old teddy bear, his smile crooked. "Hey, sweetheart," Derek said, grinning like nothing had happened. "Can we come in? I just want to see my daughter for a bit." I opened the door, let them in one last time, not out of trust, but to end it once and for all. Lily was sitting on the rug, building blocks, wide-eyed at the man claiming to be her dad. I sat close beside her, arm wrapped tightly around her shoulders like a silent shield. Derek knelt down, voice sweet as honey. "Do you miss Daddy, Princess?" Lily pressed closer into me, saying nothing. I watched his eyes scan the apartment, like a predator sniffing out prey. Megan stood in the corner, pretending to scroll her phone, but her fingers didn't move. Susan, in the kitchen making tea, suddenly paused. "Natalie," she whispered tensely, "your office." I glanced over, the door slightly ajar, soft light spilling from the laptop. My heart pounded. I stepped quietly down the hall. She was in my room. I pushed the door open. Megan sat at my desk, laptop open, fingers clacking like rain. The screen showed a black command line window. I lunged, yanked the power cord. The screen went black. Megan turned, face pale, but quickly put on a fake smile. "What are you doing?" I was just looking at photos. I said nothing. Just stared her down, cold, unmoving. I slammed the laptop shut, clutching it to my chest. "Get out," I said, my voice low but sharp as a blade. "Both of you." Now Derek walked in, pretending to be confused. "What's going on, Natalie?" I didn't answer. I simply pointed at the door. When they left, I locked it tight, heart still pounding. Susan put a hand on my shoulder. "Check everything now." I opened the laptop, ran a virus scan. Every second felt like a year. The result popped up. I froze. A keylogger had been installed, tracking every keystroke, passwords, bank accounts, emails. Installed 10 minutes ago, exactly when Megan had been sitting there. I wiped the software, changed every password, activated two-factor authentication. Then I shut the laptop and sat still, staring at the screen's faint reflection. I wasn't angry anymore. What I felt was something clearer, colder, final. This wasn't about family anymore. This was a crime. I should have called the police right then. I should have, but I didn't. I didn't want to drag my daughter into another storm. I needed something solid, not chaos. So I called my lawyer, Jason. He'd helped me back when I started the company. A calm, principled man who understood how I handled things. "Jason," I said, "I need to file for a restraining order." "I have evidence." He replied simply, "Tell me everything." I told him about Derek and Megan showing up, the threatening messages, and how Megan had installed spyware on my laptop. I sent over the full system report, screenshots, installation logs. Jason moved quickly. Within 2 days, he had the full case ready to submit to court. Every detail was in the report. The exact timestamp the software was installed, the access code, the IP address matching Derek's home, and the string of messages demanding money, threatening, slandering me. "This is more than enough," Jason said as he reviewed the final file. "We have clear evidence of data breach and personal threats. You will be protected." The hearing was held a month later. It was closed to the public, but the air in the courtroom was still thick and suffocating. I sat beside Jason. Across from us sat Derek and Megan, each with their own lawyer. The judge read through every page of the evidence, his eyes pausing on the system log. "This is a serious offense," he said slowly. "Installing software to steal personal data, unauthorized access to financial information. This isn't a family matter." Derek's lawyer tried to defend him. "Your Honor, my client simply misunderstood. This was a miscommunication. He meant no harm." But the judge cut in. "He's 32 years old. That's old enough to know better. This is no misunderstanding." The gavel came down. The restraining order was granted permanently. Derek and Megan were forbidden from contacting or coming near me and my daughter, with a 500-foot radius around our home and my workplace. Walking out of that courtroom, I felt something strange. Not joy, not hatred, just a quiet emptiness. I had protected the life I built. And this time, no one would ever violate it again. I thought it was all over after the trial. But 3 days later, while I was sitting in front of my work monitor, finishing the last lines of code for a project, my phone suddenly buzzed. A notification from the bank. Two-factor authentication request. I froze. My heart raced. A rush of possibilities ran through my head. System glitch. Wrong account. I opened the banking app, my fingers ice cold. The transaction history was right there. A transfer request for $25,000 to a strange account, initiated just 10 minutes earlier. The two-factor authentication had blocked it in time. But just seeing that number felt like someone had broken into my home in the middle of the night and rummaged through every drawer. I called Jason immediately. My voice trembled, but was steady. Jason, he tried to withdraw money again. It just happened, on the other end. He paused for a few seconds, then said firmly, "Don't touch anything." "I'm calling the police now." That sentence, short and sharp, felt like the final lock clicking into place. I sat there, hearing my heartbeat sync with the ticking clock, in a room where only the soft hum of the air conditioner remained, like the ragged breath of fear itself. The police launched the investigation the same day. They worked with the bank's cybersecurity team to trace the IP address that initiated the transaction. I followed every step of the updates closely. I still remember the fourth night after it happened, just after I had tucked Lily into bed, when my phone rang. It was the lead investigator. His voice was steady and cold. "We've found it, Ms. Natalie." The transaction was made from Derek Carter's personal device. I stood there, frozen, speechless for a moment. He continued, voice lower now. "He didn't just violate the restraining order. This was intentional fraud. We'll begin filing criminal charges." "Thank you," I whispered, then hung up. In the quiet apartment, streetlights poured through the curtains, casting a long strip of light on the wall. I held my daughter close, feeling the warmth of her small body. A part of me, just a small part, still felt pity. After all, he was once the man I promised to grow old with, and he is Lily's father. But the rest of me, the part that had become all too familiar with betrayal, manipulation, and midnight phone calls, felt only a chilling sense of relief. A week later, the police sent the final report. Derek and Megan were charged with data breach and financial fraud, placed on probation, with a criminal record. I didn't attend the hearing. Jason represented me. When he called to inform me, he kept it brief. I stayed silent, staring out the window. The city lights still burned bright. Months passed, slowly, like the final scenes of a horror film winding down. Derek and Megan remained on probation, required to check in weekly with the court. They carried a criminal record now, a permanent stain that would keep them from pulling the same stunt again. According to Susan, I heard Derek sold his last car, then vanished with Megan out of the city. No one knew exactly where they went, and I didn't care. I didn't want to know. I just wanted them out of my life, like a nightmare that finally fades with the sunrise. I took a few days off work, needing to clear my mind of their shadow. I took Lily to the park, sat by the lake, watched her run around and laugh freely. Susan called every night, her voice warm. "Are you okay, Natalie?" We made it through. I smiled, truly, for the first time in so long, feeling peace. I had protected my little family. Lily with her innocent laughter, Susan with her unconditional love, and myself, the woman who was once abandoned but now stands tall. No one could ever take that away from me again. My life, finally, was mine. I also took time off for my daughter and drove back to see Susan, the only woman in my life who had never once walked away from me. She still lived in that little house at the end of the street, where the warm yellow light spilled from the old window each night, just enough to make you feel at peace. Her small diner was more polished now, with fresh paint on the walls, a brand new sign, and more customers than ever. When I stepped in, she was still behind the counter, apron tied tight, her hair grayer than before. But that smile, gentle, warm, and unmistakably real, was exactly the same as the day I first met her. That night, after closing up, she made me a cup of jasmine tea, its soft aroma filling the kitchen. The warm light fell on her face, deep wrinkles etched like years of weather carved into her skin. We talked about everything: my job in Seattle, the programming projects, how she had learned to use a tablet to manage orders. Susan looked at me through the glow of the light, her voice low. "I'm proud of you, Natalie. Of everything you've done. Of how you faced Derek." I smiled, warmth blooming inside me. But before I could answer, she continued, "I need to tell you something." Her tone was calm but steady, just as it always had been. I looked up, heart quietly stirring. "Derek called me once," she said, pausing, her eyes drifting into the distance. Her voice trembled. "A few months ago, before all the legal mess started, he said he was sick, needed $10,000 for treatment." My heart tightened, like someone had it clenched in a fist. "You gave it to him," I guessed. She smiled weakly, that kind of trembling smile that almost mocks itself. "I thought he was my son." I believed him. I held her hand. "He lied, didn't he?" She nodded, tears rolling down her cheeks. "After you told me about the keylogger, the restraining order, I called him to ask again. He admitted he wasn't sick. The money, I don't even know what he used it for. Then he cut contact, blocked my number." "Did you try to get it back?" I asked. "I did, but he disappeared." She let out a brittle, broken laugh. "You know, I'm not even angry about the money. I just feel foolish, still believing a mother's love could save someone who had already chosen a different path." I looked down at her hands resting on the table, thin, veins raised, fingers still dusted with flour. And in them, I didn't just see the pain of a mother who had been deceived, but the quiet collapse of a belief that had lasted a lifetime. I held her hand, squeezing gently. "I'm sorry, Mom." She shook her head, her smile faint but her eyes brighter. "Don't be. I just realized sometimes blood doesn't mean a thing. But you stayed. You didn't walk away. That's enough." She stood up, went to her room, and returned with a thick envelope. "I've redone the will," she said slowly, as if bracing for me to protest. "This house, the diner, and my small savings, they'll all go to you and Lily. Not a cent for Derek, not a cent for Megan. Just you. Not because I want to make it up to you, but because I want it to belong to the person who truly stayed with me." I went still, eyes stinging. "Mom, I don't need—" "You do," she interrupted, her voice suddenly firm in a way I'd never heard before. "Not the money. The acknowledgement. You are my family. Not because you used to be his wife, but because you lived with kindness and loved the way it should be." I broke down, crying for the first time in years. She cried too. Those old, heavy tears that moved slowly, but stung like salt. We sat there in the little kitchen, the clock ticking quietly in the background, and I knew I had found home. Not in Seattle, not in the fancy apartment, but here, beside Susan, beside Lily. Maybe in that moment, we both finally understood. Sometimes, true family isn't made by blood, but by the people who choose to stay, even when no one asked them to. The next morning, I woke up to the first light slipping through the curtains, shining on the photo frame she had placed on the shelf. Everything in the house was still, just as always, except there was no sound of her making tea in the kitchen. I walked into her room. She was lying there, peaceful, hands folded as if simply resting. She had passed in her sleep so gently that I could hardly believe it. On the nightstand, her signed will still lay neatly inside the envelope, right next to a cup of tea she hadn't finished. I sat down beside her, took her now cold hand in mine, and let the tears fall without even trying to stop them. She had left just hours after hugging me one last time and whispering, "We are family." My daughter came in, stood quietly, and softly asked, "Is Grandma just sleeping, Mommy?" I couldn't answer. In that sunlit room, I realized that the one woman who had ever held me without judgment was gone forever. The funeral was simple, just a few close neighbors, her former coworkers, and me with my daughter. I kept the last promise I made to her. No one mentioned Derek, not a single word. We scattered her ashes into the little river behind the diner, the one she always said, "When water flows, sorrow goes with it." As the final handful of ash dissolved into the wind, I felt like a part of my heart was washed clean, no longer hurting, just empty. I didn't cry anymore. I couldn't cry anymore. But inside me, a new wound opened. A second loss, deeper than even when Derek left me. After the funeral, I returned to Seattle. The apartment suddenly felt wide and unbearably quiet. I realized I couldn't keep pretending to be okay forever. So for the first time in years, I booked an appointment with a therapist. Her name was Dr. Harper, around 50, small in build, with a calm, low voice. During the first session, I sat in silence for a long time, before I could even say my first sentence. I don't know why I keep getting left behind. Even when I've tried to live kindly, she looked at me, nodded gently, didn't interrupt, and simply said, "It's okay." We'll take it slow. I went to see her every week. We talked about Derek, about the betrayal, about what it feels like to be abandoned, about the pain of trusting again, only to be deceived. I told her about my mother-in-law, too, about how she passed, without any final words, leaving behind only the kind of peace that makes the living weep. Each time I left therapy, I felt a little lighter. I no longer obsessed over those who had left, but began to feel grateful for those who had stayed, even if only for a short stretch of my life. As the months passed, I started to see more clearly that sometimes leaving is also a form of love, and that I could still start over, even with wounds that had yet to fade. I stopped asking myself if I should forgive Derek, if I should try to save him one more time. I stopped blaming myself for not being able to keep Susan. I began thinking about the future, about Lily, and what I could do with the money I had earned. I was financially stable, investing well, with higher returns than ever. But money didn't fill the emptiness. It only gave me choices. I used a portion of my savings to donate to vocational programs for single women, women like me, 5 years ago, lost, alone, but still resilient. I didn't want them to have to rise alone in the dark. I wanted them to know that somewhere there was still light, even if faint, just like the light I once received. My company continued to grow. New projects, long meetings, mornings full of emails, and quiet evenings at my desk. The programming projects I now led were no longer about survival, but creative freedom, spaces where I could shape the future with clean lines of code. Investments that once felt risky now flourished, providing the security I used to crave during those long nights counting every dollar. I worked for the joy of building something meaningful, just like the way I once stitched my life back together, carefully and patiently. My investments began generating steady returns. I kept allocating a portion toward scholarship funds. Every time I received photos of smiling children at graduation ceremonies, I felt a small, invisible thread connecting me to people I had never met. A thread of understanding, of wounds once raw, now transformed into strength. I began forming small routines, everyday actions that became a ritual of healing. Each morning, I woke up earlier to make a cup of coffee exactly the way Susan used to. Lightly bitter, warm, with a splash of milk, to remind me that life still holds sweetness amidst the loss. I tidied the apartment, rearranged old photos, Lily beaming next to Susan, those moments we baked together in the tiny kitchen. Not to forget, but to hold them as pieces of a more complete picture. I went on to donate another $50,000 to the scholarship fund, like a promise to myself and to the children still struggling, those who, like me 5 years ago, were lost, alone, but still standing. Every weekend, I took Lily to visit Susan's old diner. I could feel her absence like a gentle silence, not painful anymore, just a soft part of memory. Lily ran between the wooden tables, drawing pictures and whispering to Susan's photo on the wall. "Grandma, I learned a new word today." We deepened our bond through simple acts, brewing tea together, reading books side by side, sitting by the window watching the rain, the same window where Susan used to sit and tell her stories. That was my real family, not Derek and his lies, not Megan and her greedy eyes, but Lily, with her innocent laughter, Susan through the memories that lingered, and a connection that didn't need promises, only the quiet presence that repeated, day after day, like a poem that heals. Sometimes I still thought about the past, not as piercing memories, but as shards of mirror reflecting parts of who I am. I didn't regret any of it, because without those dark days, I would have never understood the meaning of peace. I had once lost almost everything: my marriage, my faith, even my self-worth. But slowly, piece by piece, I rebuilt them with bare hands and a heart that had learned when to stay silent. I don't know where Derek and Megan are, probably wandering some distant city, carrying their criminal records and failed schemes. And I don't care anymore, truly don't, because my freedom is no longer tethered to them. I feel peace now, the kind that settles like still water after a storm, where I can look into the mirror and see a woman who made it, who rose above Derek leaving, who carried the grief of losing Susan, and still chose to begin again with steady steps. My life is simple now. I work, raise my child, read books, write a few journal lines, and smile when I think about the people who once helped me stand. I no longer search for validation from others. I don't need to be loved to feel worthy. I just need myself, steady enough, kind enough, and quiet enough. This life, finally, truly belongs to me. And maybe, if I had to say one thing to close it all, it would be, some wounds never disappear, but one day you'll look back and see they've bloomed. And if you're still listening, maybe you too have walked through storms like I have. Loss, betrayal, and nights that felt endless. I just want to say this to you. You'll be okay. One day you'll wake up and realize you're no longer shaking. Please share your story in the comments. I read them all. And who knows, maybe your story will be the light someone else is waiting for. And if this is your first time on the channel, don't forget to hit subscribe, because we're still telling stories like this, stories of betrayal, awakening, and the quiet strength it takes to stand up on your own. Thank you for listening, and may you find peace in your own way.